This is going to be a little hybrid-y because we're going to, in a second, get Lior Amihai from Shalom Achshav on Zoom. But in the meantime, I'm going to bring up Mickey Gitzin, acting CEO of New Israel Fund, Nitzan Horowitz, journalist and former MK and leader of the Meretz party, and our moderator, JSpaceCanada board member Ori Gilboa. Come on up, y'all. You can fight over seats.
All right, well, thank you all so much for joining us, and thank you, Nitzan and Mickey, for coming by. So I thought we could get started just by some quick introductions. So if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're coming from, about your work.
Good morning, good afternoon, good day. My name is Nitzan Horowitz. I'm an author, I'm a journalist. I'm a former chairperson of the Meretz party, which is one of the sponsors of this event. And I was a Minister of Health in the former government, not this one, just before Netanyahu. And I'm really happy to be here. And thank you, Meital, and all the organizations for this warm welcome. It wasn't easy for me to get here. I had to go through Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, to get a flight to Paris, and then, okay. Anyway, but I'm here, and thank you again for having me.
Good afternoon, I guess, everyone. It's really a privilege to be here with you. I see many familiar faces and some that I'm probably going to need to meet later on. My name is Mickey Gitzin. I'm currently the acting CEO of the New Israel Fund. So I sit in New York, but just up until December, I led the office of NIF in Israel on the ground for 8 years. Prior to that, I led some nonprofits organizations in the space of religious freedom, and I was on the city council in Tel Aviv. And I'm very, very pleased to be here and start our conversation.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Hey, Lior.
Oh, perfect timing. Hi, Lior. Can you hear us?
I feel like Bushi and Netanyahu a little bit.
How about we'll start with some questions and then we'll jump to Lior. It looks like there might be some technical difficulties. Okay. So Nitzan, I'll start with your questions if that's okay.
Sure.
So you spent your career inside Israeli politics and you've watched all of this up close. The right has built a complete ecosystem. The think tanks, the media, the legal architecture, the settlement movements, the religious institutions, which all are telling the same story about what Israel is and who it belongs to. The left has not built that. Is there anything being built right now inside Israel or in the diaspora that you think is actually working? Something that you're looking at and you think, this is the right model. This is what we should be putting real money and energy behind.
Well, thank you for this question. I think your introduction is a true description of reality regarding the ecosystem of the right in Israel. Just 3 quick points about it. First of all, the most important element in their ecosystem is education. They have entire networks of schools, you know, and many people work there, and this is the basis for their entire operation in Israel. Second is that in this ecosystem, it's not just ideology. There are hundreds of thousands of people who work there, and they depend on their salaries by those religious establishments, organizations, schools, right-wing organizations, government, right-wing agencies, etc., etc. So this is a whole structure that builds an incredible political force. So money is important. And third is that left-wing, the left-wing camp, political camp in Israel used to have all of that before. We lost it after the political sort of change in the end of the 70s, okay? It was stupid to do, but now we have to build everything from scratch. Now, answering your questions, what is going on now? First of all, I think the most important point is that people begin to be aware to this issue, because till recently, people in my side of the political map were not fully aware of this ecosystem phenomena. Okay, so this is the most important thing: awareness. What do we do? First of all, we prepare for the coming government. We hope that October we would have political change in Israel, and this would be a historical opportunity to make some fundamental changes and to rebuild this ecosystem on our side. Okay, so there are a lot of preparations going on now in order to be prepared once the day is there, once we're there, okay? So there are quite a few, many actually, organizations that are preparing this new government agenda because, you know, it's budget and legislation, there are a lot of issues. Second, in order to ensure our victory on October, there are actually few organizations working to ensure that elections would be honest, okay? This is a very important thing. Netanyahu does not enjoy the majority according to the opinion polls, and so he would do whatever he can, he and his partners, to sort of sabotage the elections and to, you know, to make all sorts of tricks in order to cheat, to put it plainly. So we are getting ready. There are different operations going on now to ensure that elections are free and fair and honest, in very important issue. So supporting those organizations is very important. Media. An important part of the right-wing ecosystem is their control on important media vehicles. There are new initiatives, very encouraging initiatives on our side to create a proper answer to that. For instance, just to give you an example, there is an organization, young guys, tech-minded, called Under the Radar, מתחת לרדאר, and they do an amazing job on social media, for instance, addressing young people, etc., etc. So those kinds of initiatives are extremely important. And two more quick points. First of all, the real test would be, I think, after the elections, once there is a new government. There we're going to have a very important challenge, because this new government would be composed of different political parties, both right-wing parties, left-wing parties, center parties, not a natural coalition. So we would have to do our most in order to advance our, you know, our ideology. It's not going to be easy. And the last point, which I think is the most urgent today regarding support of Israeli NGOs, I think that the most important now is to support those NGOs in Israel that are acting against settlers' violence. Since the police is deeply corrupted because of the Ben-Gvir leadership, and the army is sort of, you know, on the sides of all that, the settlers are, you know, some of them are doing sort of pogroms on a daily basis. And there are some Israeli brave organizations, NGOs, that are fighting back and monitoring the situation, and they bear witness. They go there on the ground and they take pictures and they testify and they file complaints, and this is extremely, extremely urgent and important to support them. So there you have a whole array of measures, organizations, actions that are there in order to ensure that there is a real change in a few months' time.
That's excellent.
Thank
you. And actually, that
Thank you.
tangents really nicely to my question for Lior. I'm wondering if it works now. Lior, can you hear us?
Yes, I hear you very well.
Okay, perfect. Yay! All right, so Lior, I'm going to ask you my question, and then if you can just introduce yourself as part of your answer, that would be fantastic. So I want to put some numbers on the table. Last year, over 37,000 Palestinians were displaced in the West Bank. Settler attacks were running at 5 a day, and entire rural communities simply ceased to exist. And here's what I think fundamentally shifted, is that the argument that this is a rogue settler movement operating outside of state control is no longer credible. The UN has concluded that settler violence is coordinated and state-enabled, that the line between settler and soldier has effectively disappeared. So when you bring these numbers to the Knesset, to diplomats, to the international press, what's the argument you're making now? Because the state should rein in the settlers is a very different argument from the state is the settlers.
Thank you. So I must tell you, it's a bit odd to be in this situation right now. I can't see any of you. So I heard Nitzan, I'm hearing you, but I can't see any of the audience or you guys, so it's a bit weird. So thank you for the question. I think you're right on in the sense that what we're seeing since this government was established is something that we haven't seen before. I will say that the general argument that you were making is something that we've made for quite some time. So that the argument that it's state violence is not something new to us, but certainly under this government, this has reached peaks that even us in our most extreme nightmares, we didn't believe that the state of Israel would reach to. And you're right, these pogroms are happening on a regular basis, on a daily basis, sometimes several times a day, certainly several times a week. And the results are horrifying. They're horrifying because we see, I think B'Tselem, about a month ago I checked, I think it was 51 Palestinian communities that have left their lands, their homes, complete regions are emptied out by Palestinian communities. You know, I didn't introduce myself, so my name is Lior, I'm the director of Peace Now. Since this government was formed, that's when I joined Peace Now as its director. In the past, I was also the director of Yesh Din, a human rights organization that tackles settler violence as well. And prior to that, I was also at Peace Now for quite some time. I was a researcher in our settlement watch, where we monitor the settlement activities. I think never there was a period that there was such hostile towards, the settler violence was such hostile. Now, I'll say what we say is twofold. I think we say that that it's state, that it's complete state, and we show the connection between the settlers who are often soldiers, so that they're part of units of the military, who participate in this violence, who are active there. In the past, we used to say that there's lack of accountability, but it's far from that. It's much more than that. We see the police not investigating. We sometimes see law enforcement in the scene itself. So it's certainly much more dangerous and much more alarming. The argument also goes that settler terrorism, is what we term it here, for lack of a better word, because it's not a very good word, maybe state terrorism, I don't know, is that it's only a symptom of this government. This government, since it was established, has done unprecedented things in all elements that regard the occupation. This government has made a deal, and as part of this deal, the coalition that this government has and gave the keys to the Israeli policy, the foreign policy, or the policy in regards to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, in the hands of the religious Zionists, of the Smotrich camp, of the Ben Gvir camp. They're the one who are leading the Israeli policy on this issue, with complete support of Netanyahu, of course. And when you look at the figures of how many settlements they approved, just last week we learned from a leak that during this escalation with Iran, during this current war, it was important for the government to approve secretly 34 new settlements in the occupied territories. That reaches over 100 new settlements that this government established by a decision. It also established nearly 200 unauthorized settlements, what we term outposts or farm or agricultural outposts, which much of the settler terrorism comes from these outposts. We have a report coming up soon where we calculated almost 20% of the occupied area of the West Bank is now in the control of the land. So nearly 20% of the West Bank is now in control of outposts. So during this, the lands that they took throughout this, under this government alone. So these outposts are leading to settler terrorism. They're also leading to take over huge chunks of lands in the occupied territories. And that's just, settlements and outposts. We're talking about roads, figures that, even for us, we couldn't, we can't understand them. I'll give you a few examples. 30% of the budget of transportation of highways inside Israel goes to faraway settlements. So 30% of the budget of Israel's budget under war, where when the economy is collapsing, where there's no budget for the people, the citizens of the north or the south, the government chooses to invest 30% of its roads budget, its transportation budget, to faraway settlements. And of course, we must also include the changes in the jurisdiction. We talk a lot about the danger of the Israeli democracy. However, in the West Bank, the government has already transformed the legal system. For the first time in our history, we have civilians, civil servants, legal advisors who are not part of the military, who rule the West Bank on issues of settlers and land. This is really changing how the legal system of the occupied territories is run, and of course the geographical landscape. And I can expand more if you want on any of these.
Thank you. Bleak stuff. As a follow-up, Settlement Watch, I think, is really an essential source that Peace Now is bringing to the world. It's really the primary source for what's happening in the ground in the West Bank. Foreign ministries cite you, UN cites you, journalists cite you. But I think most people here actually don't know how the information gets produced. So could you walk us through it, how you actually produce the information in the West Bank, how the research gets done, and how you then get it in front of the right people?
Oh, well, thank you for this question. It's actually quite interesting. It's not very sophisticated, but it's very systematic and it's very thorough. So we have just 2 researchers and to do a Settlement Watch, but we do it systematically since the early 90s. And of course, we professionalized and developed over the years. But what we basically do is we have ground surveys. We travel the West Bank on a regular basis, twice, 3 times, sometimes 4 times a week, to find out these outposts. The figure of 185 or 186 outposts that we verified and counted over the past 3 years. We didn't know about them by chance. We didn't read about it anywhere. It's our researchers traveling and roaming the West Bank and finding them out and traveling very close to them or entering them just to verify that they're outposts. So we have a very thorough field research. Of course, this is complemented by we go through Parliament to read protocols of committees, protocols of municipalities. We look at the finance committee in Parliament to learn about the transfer of funding. We go to committees that discuss planning issues, and also we use the legal system. The legal system in Israel is, there was a time about, a couple of years ago, when we used to take pride in the Israeli legal system, in the jurisdiction, that it's liberal in the sense if you talk about women's rights or gay rights to a certain degree. But in the West Bank and in the occupation, it was always very, very hard. It was always problematic. We've had few successes, but generally speaking, the legal system is failing us in the occupied territories. But what we are still gaining from them many times is knowledge and information, something that is hard for the public to get. So we would petition to the Supreme Court on certain issues, and then we'd get a lot of information on government policy and action in the West Bank. So we have our different methods. Of course, we also do aerial surveys. We take aerial photos of the West Bank to figure out the different changes, and we get quite a lot of information like that. I'll give you one data information that we received from both aerial photos and our surveys on the ground, and maybe I'll end there, is roads. Following the 7th of October, our researchers said immediately that there were 2 things that were happening. So go back to the 7th of October, how horrific it was, and then the war that erupted immediately, and we're all in trauma and all in chaos, but settlers were working. And immediately, human rights organizations like Nitzan reported on Palestinian communities that are evicting their homes due to settler terrorism, and we were reporting both on that, but also on a bunch of illegal roads that were just being crafted all of a sudden. And we've counted for, I think it's over 220 kilometers of illegal roads, 2/3 of them on private Palestinian territories, and we've managed to verify this through our ground surveys, traveling on these roads, documenting them, but also through aerial surveys where we can verify again, and double check, and see them. So we have our different methods of collecting this information.
That's great. Thank you. So Mickey, I'll turn to you now. So you lead the New Israel Fund, which funds over 150 organizations, including Arab-Jewish coexistence, legal advocacy, democracy work, religious pluralism. Rather than walking us through the whole portfolio, could you tell us about one grantee or one piece of work that surprised you or that made you think this is really what civil society is capable of?
So I'll do the most Israeli thing one can do is I'll correct your question and then by that I'll answer it. So NIF was established the way you just described as an organization that funds many organizations in the field, and many of the organizations that were mentioned either by Nitzan or Lior are organizations we funded historically. But currently we see our job much more focused and much more strategic, thinking about broad civil society in times in which the reality is so catastrophic would be something that will be unstrategic. So we do work into strengthening and fight over Israeli democracy, but our definition of democracy is very, very clear. One, full equality for Palestinian citizens of Israel, Arab citizens of Israel, a significant investment there. Two, there is no such a thing as democracy with occupation. We are the main funder and organizer of the space that we were just mentioning, about both thinking how a peace would look like, what is the space for peace, but less importantly, how do you block the current reality on the ground? And as Lior and Nitzan both mentioned, the idea is what is the ecosystem that works on the ground in order to block this horrific reality. So there is no one organization that we can think of that does the work, but actually the ecosystem, those who do protective presence and get direct support for us, those who do policy like Peace Now and get support from us, those who work internationally and get support from us, and how those all together come to be a feasible program that actually makes change on the ground. And the last thing is, of course, civil rights and issues to do with democratic institutions within the state of Israel. In order to do so, one needs to do two things. First of all, block and be very clear about what are you trying to block in the current moment. And there are so many of them, right? When it comes to the courts, when it comes to inequality of Palestinian citizens of Israel, and of course when it comes to the occupied territories. But at the same time, and Nitzan was on point, at least for us, is like, how do you build the movement? And what are the institutions one needs to build in order to create an alternative? And that means what are the ideas, what are the policies, how you get it to the public, how do you organize the public? And all of these spaces are spaces that we are looking at. And I'll give you two examples that shows the way we work. And we're having Lior here, so I'll use Peace Now as a great example of our partner. 2 years ago, we've done a research in the Knesset, asking members of Knesset, what do they need from us? And being us, we thought about broad sense of things. And one of the things they said, there is not enough information or not clear enough of information that gets into members of Knesset hands when they need to work on the occupations. We asked the members of Knesset who would be organizations that you're comfortable working with. They said Peace Now, they said the Geneva Initiative. And we came to Peace Now and Geneva Initiative and say, would you take the responsibility of having a full-time lobbyist in the Knesset jointly with the Geneva Initiative, so when members of Knesset are going to the Finance Committee or they're going to the Security Committee and so on, they have the information. So we look at the reality, try to give it answers, partnering with the organizations. On the other side is, I'll take from the same space, we've seen a movement of activists. As opposed to many of the spaces in which we work, protective presence of Palestinians in the West Bank is mainly unorganized. Those are activists who are on the ground, and if you try to put them into organizations, that would be the end of it, right? Because this is the spirit. And we actually learn from the field, because we are in the field, the needs of these activists directly. So instead of searching for an organization to support them, we started on our own to ask what kind of a support these individuals would need in order to continue to do their work. So it's, from one end, looking from top down, okay, what are the needs in the Knesset? Who can be our best partner to do so? Peace Now, a great example, right, along with the Geneva Initiative. Or looking at trends happening on the ground in reality, in which, as Nitzan said, as Lior said, there is no police, there is no military actually intervention. So the only people who can protect Palestinians actually are people that stand there with their own body. So we would go and support them directly in order to do the work. And I think it shows a bit about the change that NIF has gone through the years. First of all, we are much more focused. We know what are the pillars of democracy in the current moment of Israel. And we do both proactive work, trying to ask ourselves what are the needed actions to be done at the current moment, but most importantly also, what are the things happening on the ground that we need to be supporting eventually. And the answer for it is always an ecosystem. Never one individual organization, but always what are the different elements of work that together can create a difference. And that's our current strategy, is always looking at the macro level players rather than one kind of strategy that changes reality.
That's great. Thank you. So just to follow up on that, how do you then identify the right places to put your chips, right? Because at the end of the day, there's finite resources. There are many organizations out there. You can be reactive and sort of help the activists on the ground. You can proactively try to initiate some pro-democracy movements. But how do you, as NIF, decide where to put your chips?
That's what makes our work interesting. Otherwise, it would have been boring. So the number one question is, and always, is what's needed on the ground? What's needed? What are the main challenges that we see at the current moment? The left hasn't had institutions or kind of dropped institutions. How do you rebuild institutions? Or problems like settler violence is in rise. How do we answer that? So first of all, we need to be very close and connected to the ground. A. B, to ask ourselves, what's our added value, right? Where do we stand that others can do the work, or where our work would actually not be very significant? So I'll give you an example. Everyone says that the most important thing is to go and convince certain communities that are out of reach of the left to be connected to our values. I'm not sure NIF is the best vehicle to do such work, because who we are, what do we stand for, and so on. There are better organizations to do so. There are certain spaces in which the mainstream Jewish community took over. When we started supporting religious freedom organizations or LGBTQI organizations or women's organizations, no mainstream organization would touch these issues, not at all. Today the reality is different. There are others, funders, that would touch these spaces that we touched in the past. And so it doesn't mean that we would not touch it completely, but it definitely means that we can focus our work in different spaces. And the third issue is, where do we have true partners or can build partners to create change? Because there are spaces that are extremely important, really, really important, but are, let's say, medium. But our size does not allow us to be a very significant player within the space of media. It requires much more money than we can ever bring. Or there are spaces that other funders are much more equipped than we are. So it's the problems, the issues as we see them, the need on the ground, and then who are the other partners or other funders that can play a role there. And we're really trying hard to make sure that we are doing what we've always done. And people here, I've known people that supported NIF for a very long time. We're trying to be ahead of the camp, but not too much ahead of the camp so we don't miss out the public that we're trying to lead. So it's kind of like talking to the mainstream, but being a bit ahead of the mainstream so we can push them to the next stage. And I think that, unfortunately, the last few years have been extraordinary for us, because we see change not only in Israel. The reality in Israel is, of course, both problematic, but also, I want to say, uplifting in a way. The movement that stands against this government is something we haven't seen in other places around the world, and we need to be aware of it. It's not only, you always want to widen your space of, like, there are settler violence, but there's also the Jews in Israelis, Palestinians, and Jews who stand there to protect them. You want to look at things happening, in the democratic space, but also those who stand against it. But I'm saying that these 3 or 4 years have been really incredible because I think that we were able to reach many more diaspora Jews in a way we've never been able to reach before, because people are searching for a space in which they can be very much true to their values, know exactly what they stand for, but at the same time not completely give up on their relationship, their connection to Israel and Israelis that they care and cherish. So that's where we are today.
Thank you. So, Nitzan, I'll go back to you. And here's a number that I think should unsettle everyone in this room, which is 75. That's a share of first-time Israeli voters who now identify as right-wing, according to a recent N12 poll. And even among veteran voters, it now sits at 68%. The public mood tells the same story. Pew found that in 2025, only 1 in 5 Israelis still believes in a peaceful two-state coexistence is possible, which is the lowest figure they've recorded since 2013 and down 14 points in the last 2 years. Recent polls project the Democrats to pick up 9 seats. You led Meretz. Is there an Israeli left anymore as a political force that could actually govern? And if the answer is no, what follows from that?
Well, first of all, let me tell you, friends, that I'm optimistic. And I'm not naive and I'm not out of touch. On the contrary, I'm optimistic because I see the figures and I see the facts. First of all, regarding those polls about people define themselves as right-wing. Indeed, many people define themselves as right-wing, but they would like Netanyahu to go. It's not contradictory. We have a whole party nowadays led by former Prime Minister Bennett, who is very much right-wing, but he's part of the opposition, and he might be the next Prime Minister, and he would facilitate the government change. Okay, so being right-wing doesn't mean that you automatically support Netanyahu or support his government. Okay, so this is a very important issue. Now, again, since many months now, according to almost all opinion polls, Netanyahu does not have the majority, okay? And doesn't matter whether you watch the polls on Channel 12 or Channel 13th or the Israeli Broadcasting Authority. In all the credible major opinion polls, Netanyahu does not enjoy a majority. So this is why I talked before about the effort to ensure honest and fair elections. Because if elections are fair, he's going to go. Okay, he's done. He's done. Now, the two-state solution. First of all, let me tell you that I believe, and again, I'm not naive. I wrote a book about the October 7th attack. Many of my friends were killed. I know personally some of the hostages that were murdered, and believe me, this was a big shock for me. But I truly convinced, and not out of, imagination, that the two-state solution is the only solution to the conflict. Now, regarding Israeli public opinion, it's true that in this current atmosphere of violence and hate, when we experience this constant situation of war that has been going on since October 7th, actually, and I live in the north, right, like 5 kilometers from the Lebanese border, and believe me, this is like a nightmare. It's difficult to talk about peaceful solutions. you talk to people, they tell you, whom are we going to make peace with those bloody terrorists? We should kill them all. Okay, but once there is a new government, and this is a key issue, once there is a new government, and I think that this is very much possible to have a new government after October. By the way, I saw today there are elections in Hungary, and according to some first opinion polls, Orban is going to lose. So
Wait.
Wait, yes. But we are hopeful about the elections in Israel. And now, once there is a new government, again, this new government is going to resemble a bit to our government, the government of change, meaning there would be right-wing parties, left-wing parties, okay, together. The idea of a two-state solution would not materialize immediately, okay? But a new government would be able to firstly calm down the situation. It's just that you have to understand that when you deal with public opinion agitated by this constant situation of war, it's impossible to talk about peace. Secondly, peace, the idea of peace, was brutally killed by this Netanyahu regime, in recent years. Peace became something like a ridiculous thing, You say peace, they say, oh, you're such a loser, sucker. What are you talking about, peace? I mean, we're in the Middle East. But once the situation, and I know what I'm talking about, once the situation calms down with Lebanon, with Iran, with the West Bank, once the settlers' violence is dealt with, then there is room for reopening the issue of a solution with our Palestinian neighbors. Now, this would be a process, of course. It won't happen tomorrow. It must be understood. So there is a process here. First, to ensure free elections. Then a new government based on a new coalition. Then, to ease the situation, to calm down the situation, the military situation, the defense situation, and it is possible. Our government, the borders were quiet. We didn't have all these things going on. And then we can discuss the solutions for the Palestinian issue. Let me just remind you that even according to President Trump's, what he called the deal of the century, okay, the deal of the century, he talked about a Palestinian state. Even Trump. And it was Jared Kushner's plan, okay? And Bibi agreed. So I believe that a new prime minister, even if it's Bennett, would be much more susceptible to considering new approaches. Let me tell you, I was under his government. Now, I know he's right-wing, believe me, he's not my cup of tea. I met the Palestinian president, Abu Mazen Mahmoud Abbas, many times, as a minister as well. He knew about it. He was not extremely happy about it, but he said, okay, I understand, go ahead. I can give you other examples. The key condition is to have a new government in Israel, because with this current extreme right-wing fascist, that's the word, government, nothing is possible. Just war and blood and killing and hate. Once there is a new government, once political climate changes, then many things would be possible again. So believe me, friends, I'm not coming here just to delusion you, I'm truly optimistic because I read the polls carefully. I know the activities and I cherish the activities of many of the organizations supported by the NIF. As Mickey mentioned, they are doing tremendous work. And I believe that when we join forces, coming October, we would be able to make this essential step to change the government and then to discuss, viable solutions. And again, we talked about it with some people here before. I am optimistic. I think it's very possible. And I'm looking forward for this new era in Israel. Thanks.
So I think there's time for one more quick rapid fire question, which I'll ask all of you to answer. So a lot of people in this room want to do something useful, politically, philanthropically, communally. From where you sit, what kind of outside pressure or support matters right now? And I'll ask you to just be quick because we have just a few minutes. So let's start with Lior, maybe.
Okay, I'll try to be quick. I think that, the biggest danger is despair. And, we are, it's so thrilling to hear Nitzan being optimistic. We need to hear more voices like that because it does seem, we're in a situation where despair is just so common and so, it's so natural to be despair when we're in this situation. Nevertheless, we have a long struggle and there's so much we have to do, and opportunities are always there, and they will always come about. Trump will not be the American president forever. Netanyahu will not be the Israel's prime minister forever. We have so much work to do. So I would just, I think the work needs to be, everybody needs to do, her role in order to make an impact. If it's to speak abroad with, members of parliament from around the world, who one day will have more authorities and powers, if it's to influence, foundations to invest in, our value system for the state of Israel. These are things that are crucial because they mean, they're affecting our lives and the future of the state of Israel, and the Palestinians, of course. So I would just say, keep on, we don't have the luxury to give up or to be despair, just to keep on working.
Thank you. Mickey?
Yeah, I guess we'll continue the same way. I mean, most of my time I worked in Israel and my work was on the ground. I'm actually much more concerned about what I see in diaspora communities, or as concerned of what I see in diaspora communities as I concerned at home. And the reason is very clear. We need to have a support system that stands behind us, because the right wing has created a synergetic system which most of the Jewish community establishment stands behind. So ask yourself, who is your friend, who is your neighbor, who is the person who is involved in the establishment Jewish community, and how can you move them to any of the organizations involved in this conference? What can be done to create a different discourse in your own community? Because I think that in many ways, this danger of silence is much stronger and more dangerous here than in Israel. Because in Israel, we're used to it. We're in the streets. I was personally attacked by many right-wing, activists and the prime minister himself, and I know how to act. I found it very hard to try to convince my international Jewish fellows that their voice matters. So that's the only thing I want to say. Your voice matters a lot. And ask yourself, who is your friend, who is your colleague, who is your neighbor that hasn't been convinced yet that their voices matter, and just bring them to the struggle, because we need it.
Just 2 quick points. First of all, you should know that it's extremely important for us in Israel to know that there is a strong voice of dear Jewish people that are both Zionist and liberal. Now, I know it's not obvious nowadays to be both Zionist or liberal or left-wing, but this is what we are, and this is our truth. You can be for peace and human rights and Zionist at the same time. You can be Zionist and also advocating peace and human rights. It is not contradictory, okay? It is not contradictory. The false equation that we have to choose between Hamas or Netanyahu, this is false. This is false. There is another way. There is another way, and I thank you for expressing this voice. It's important for us in Israel to know that you're there. Second, and this is my own personal opinion, I do not believe so much on boycotts or sanctions against Israel. I don't think it's helpful, okay? I believe in a more positive support which can be very beneficial, meaning strengthening democratic forces in Israel, strengthening civil society in Israel, strengthening political people in Israel that are, struggling to achieve our common goals. This is much more effective than sanctions, much more helpful, and it's urgent. So thank you again for supporting Israel, supporting peace, and supporting democracy. Thanks.
Thank you very much.